wanted to share this story for a long time now, and I figured that this is the perfect place for it. When I was about 10 years old, my dad got himself a new girlfriend, Lauren. Lauren was an evil monster. When I first met her, she was lovely and friendly and all of that, and I think that I liked her off the bat, but over the years, everything went downhill, and it actually went downhill pretty fast. It started small. Lauren would steal my things and then deny it, and of course, everyone believed her. She'd tell me that my dad loved her more than me, and that if she wanted to, she could snap her fingers and he'd never see me again. She read my diary, then told everyone what I'd written. She reported me to the SPCA for abusing my animals, which I wasn't doing. After a couple years, she had influenced my dad into beating me. And yeah, I know he was an adult with choices, and I hold him just as responsible, but she would constantly tell him how bad I was and encourage him to put his hands on me. After a while, he'd just snap and end up doing what she wanted. There are so many more things that she did, but these instances give you the picture. My dad and Lauren separated when I was about 16, but they had a house together still. It was around this time, as a suicidal, miserable teenager, that I decided that I'd get even. I spent months on my plan, and this is how it unfolded. I wanted Lauren's entire life to fall apart all at once, so everything had to be perfectly timed. I started by getting her fired, along with a minor criminal record. Lauren worked at a police warehouse that housed seized items, but naughty Lauren was stealing from the warehouse, so I made notes on what she had taken and when. Once I had a decent enough list, I anonymously contacted her boss with said list. Lauren was immediately suspended pending review. After a few weeks, she was found to be guilty of stealing. She was then fired and charged with theft, including theft of a Class C substance. Now Lauren was unemployed and pretty much unemployable. On to stage 2. Lauren, with no income, needed to sell the house as she was now unable to pay her mortgage. My dad also wanted to sell so he could move in with his new girlfriend. So I took it upon myself to make the house unsellable and pretty unpleasant to live in. My dad and Lauren were stupid, never locked their back door. I was actually lucky due to this fact because I didn't have keys. So I'd sneak in when I knew they were out and hide disgusting things around the house. Bugs everywhere, old prawns under the floorboards. I even stitched some shrimp into the bottom of the curtains. I left dead mice everywhere, including under Lauren's pillow, while live mice I left in the pantry. The house stank and it seemed like no one could figure out why. Real estate agents refused to list it, or they'd only list it for far under the value, and potential buyers would leave quickly after no one could explain the source of the vile smell. Lauren was quickly approaching bankruptcy, which is exactly what I wanted. Only one area of her life was left to destroy. Lauren had been in a relationship for a year or so with this guy. I can't even remember the poor dude's name, but we'll call him John. Well, Lauren was cheating on John with his own father of all people. Poor John proposed to Lauren. He needed to know who she really was. One day when Lauren had John's dad over, I got into the house via the unlocked back door. I grabbed her cell phone, which she had a knack for leaving in the kitchen. It actually took a few attempts and a lot of house watching to get lucky with the phone. I texted John from her phone pretending to be Lauren. I told him that I was sick and asked if he would come over. Of course, good old John rushed right over. I unlocked the front door and texted him letting him know to let himself in as I was in bed. I left and sort of halfway hid in a neighbor's yard. When John landed, the drama was intense. Lauren screaming and John chasing his half-naked dad down the street, screaming and crying. I think John might have even punched his dad once he caught up to him. Obviously, the year-long relationship was over, and even John's dad decided to ditch her in an attempt to get his son's forgiveness. So now, Lauren was alone, broke, unemployable, facing charges, and likely to become bankrupt. Sadly, I don't know how the story ends. I cut contact with my dad right around this time, and thus my connection to Lauren was gone. I do remember my dad mentioning her being her own brand of suicidal right before we stopped speaking, so in my eyes, my goal was achieved. I didn't need to see the fallout anyway. just knowing what I'd accomplished was more than enough for me. And that's the story of how I got my revenge. While it might sound unreal to some, these are the lengths you go through to get even with someone when they truly deserve what's coming. My personal story of revenge took 15 years to finally resolve, and I couldn't be happier. But before I dive into it, here's some background because you're going to need it to get the setup. My ex-stepfather, a man who I refuse to acknowledge, married my mother, and since my mother is deceased, I shouldn't have to anymore, at least in part due to the fact that he was so god-awful. My mother married him because she thought that I needed a man or a father figure in my life to help raise me. He was abusive verbally. He was just a toxic person to be around in about every sense. And even when my mother and he divorced, he still insisted on trying to see me, and I had to be forced to go see him and his new wife every other weekend. I didn't get this when it was happening, and I still don't understand it now. When I moved away from the city that he was in due to me ending up in foster care, I didn't bother looking him up or trying to find out if he was even still alive. So when I moved back to the city in 2008, I was kind of surprised to see that he was still alive and kicking. I'm sorry for the lead up, but this is where the foundation of this revenge really takes place. In 2008, I had worked my ass off and I had bought myself my first car, a 1992 Buick Regal Custom. I loved that car, and I also loved helping people out, which was much easier to do with a car. Well, my ex-stepdad knew about the car because he had seen me driving around town, running errands for the local homeless shelter where I volunteered, taking guys to the doctor's office when they didn't want to wait on a bus, stuff like that. And he was a resident at said shelter. Through my volunteer work at this shelter, I had befriended a couple of young guys who had landed on hard times and were just working odd jobs to save up some money to move back to their respective hometown, which happened to be the same town that I moved back to the city from. After hearing about this and their plans to just get a Greyhound down there, I told them no, that I would actually drive them there for like $40 in gas, saving them about $250. We made arrangements and set a date for their departure. Apparently my ex-stepdad heard about this, so he cornered them in the shower that night, told them that he was going to have his way with them, and that I should be expecting that same kind of payment when I got them to that town. He even threatened to kill them, so they had no choice, and gave in to his demands. When I pulled up to pick them up the next morning, I could tell immediately that the air was off, like something had happened. The day before, these two guys were eager to leave the city behind, and now they treated my car as if it had live vipers in the passenger seat. So I asked them what was up. They told me they weren't sure about leaving the city with me anymore. I assured them that things would be fine, not knowing what my ex-stepdad had done the night prior. After a little coaxing and me mentioning that the Greyhound doesn't even run to where they were trying to go, they loaded up my trunk and off we went. I could feel the tension in the car, and it had become so thick that you could slice through it using a hydrojet. After we crossed into the neighboring state, they asked me if I could just drop them off at a motel, and they would try to find other accommodations down to where they're going. I said I wouldn't mind doing that if that's what they really wanted, but I wanted to know what brought on the sudden change of plans. After a tearful choking up in the back seat, they told me what had transpired the night before with my ex-stepdad, and I saw red. I needed to hurt him. But how? After assuring the two boys that they were going to be fine and that I wasn't even about to put them through what he did, they finally allowed me to take them all the way to their town. I instructed them to file assault charges against him and to make sure that they submit DNA samples to the police, and they assured me that they would. On the way back, I plotted my revenge against this man, and that's when it dawned on me. My ex-stepdad was a registered offender for some stupid night when he was 16. He had told me before that he was caught urinating on an elementary school swing set as a youth, and he had to register. That was actually a contributing factor as to why I ended up in foster care to begin with. Something about child endangerment, bureaucratic BS. I also know that he didn't register in our state for the last couple of years because, had he done that, he would have been kicked out of the shelter that he was staying in, since they do a 3 times a day, 7 day a week community outreach meal for not only the residents, but those who just needed a hot meal that day, which would also include children. So on the way back, I'd informed the Office of Admission staff that they had an offender in their shelter, and if they didn't get him out, I would report the shelter to the police. They had one of those safe spot stickers designating the shelter as a safe space for kids. Did I forget to mention that the shelter also ran a youth summer camp and had a youth correctional facility and library right next to it? They took action almost immediately, but when they went to evict him, he was nowhere to be found. He had taken off, not to be seen again, or at least that's what I initially thought. You see, when he vanished from the shelter that day, he thought the safest place to hide out was in his hometown, 9 states away. A smarter person would have looked up what his registration entailed and would have known that fleeing across state lines without informing law enforcement is a felony. And it doesn't just stop at the state one left, but it carries over to every state between point of origin and destination. So he had racked up 9+ felony charges against him just for that little jaunt. Fast forward a little while, and I get a message from the 2 boys on Facebook asking me for my new number. I give it to them, and I'm almost immediately put in touch with the county sheriff, one who had a federal agent in his office, asking if I knew where my ex-stepdad was. As I was telling both gentlemen that I didn't have a clue, my Facebook pinged. This message happened to be from my ex-stepdad's current wife, telling me to, quote, give her husband a chance to reconcile. A quick look on our page revealed that they were together, living in my hometown, and what's more, seriously, future Darwin Award winners here. They were living next door to the school that he was caught urinating on all those years back. I relayed that information to both law enforcement gentlemen and asked what charges they had on him. They said they had 2 counts of statutory, 3 counts of felony evasion. I mentioned his failure to register, and the day that he left my hometown, he had run to his hometown 9 states away. The county sheriff informed me that he was calling from that county and he wasn't aware of the failure to register charges, but thanked me for informing him. Ladies and gentlemen, that dirtbag that nearly ruined my life, my trust with other people, and my reputation in my hometown was finally getting what was owed to him. 25 to life for everything, and he isn't eligible for parole for another 17 years, if he even makes it that long. He's better off rotting in the depths of Tartarus for the lives that he ruined. This is the story of how I caused the death of my abusive ex-stepdad. Now, a variation of that sentence has sat in my head for a long time now. Sometimes I say it one way and it sounds like revenge. Other times I say it another way and it sounds like guilt. And most days, it feels like both. I'm not exactly proud of everything in this story. I'm also not going to pretend that this was some misunderstood man who got treated unfairly. He was abusive, manipulative, violent, and he poisoned years of our lives. But in the end, he's still dead, and part of me believes that I helped set that ending in motion. So this is the truth as I know it. When I was 9 years old, my mom met a guy that I'll call Jay. Jay was nothing special on the surface. He worked as a chef, was originally from New York, and at the time was living in South Philly. I wouldn't say that he was charismatic enough to sweep anyone off their feet. He wasn't rich, not especially handsome, not a great catch. But my mom had a history of bad relationships and even worse judgment when it came to men. My dad had already died from a drug overdose. That kind of thing wasn't rare where I grew up. Drugs were just about everywhere, and so was grief. So my mom was raising me alone, emotionally unstable, lonely, and desperate for someone to come in and play savior. She wanted a partner, some kind of stability in her life, and a father figure for me. So she gave Jay a chance. And then almost immediately, Jay was diagnosed with cancer. That changed a lot. Whatever doubts she may have had got swallowed up by sympathy. She felt needed, felt like she had to be there for him. It tied her to him in a way that I don't think she ever escaped from until years later. I was 9 and I didn't know anything. If my mom trusted him, I guess I trusted him too. Kids don't naturally assume that their parent is making a terrible mistake. But my grandparents, they noticed before I did. They noticed black eyes, excuses, and they noticed fear in my mom. One day, my grandfather had seen enough. At a corner store in the neighborhood, he beat Jay so badly that he was stuck on a couch for days afterward. Now, I'm not saying violence solves things, but I'd be lying if I said that that image doesn't still make me smile a little bit. But even then, Jay turned himself into the victim. He convinced my mom that my grandmother had manipulated my grandfather into attacking him. He made it sound like everyone was against them, that they needed to leave, and that the only solution was distance. There was even some wild family intervention where everyone argued and pleaded and accused each other while I sat there as a kid, not understanding half of what was going on. But in the end, my mom chose Jay. We packed our stuff into a shitty van. I held my 90-pound Rottweiler in my lap, and we moved to Florida. Florida. I hated it. Now, I'm sure there are some people out there that love Florida, and good for them. But for me, it was exile. We had no family there. There was no support. No grandparents to notice bruises, no cousins, no people who knew Jay for what he really was. Just us trapped in a state that I never wanted to be in the first place, with a man who only got worse once we were isolated. My mom was abused constantly, sometimes physically, but always emotionally. I was mostly mentally abused, belittled, controlled, treated like an inconvenience over a person, spoken to like I was stupid and made to feel like anything wrong in the house was somehow my fault. He had a way of turning every room tense. Even silence felt dangerous around him. During those years, I also lost my great-grandmother. I wanted to go back north for her funeral, but Jay said no. That sounds like a small detail, but it isn't. It was another reminder that he controlled where we went, what we did, and even how we got to mourn. I carried a lot of anger by then, and I started pushing my mom more and more to leave this man. I was older now, and I understood what he was. I couldn't unsee it anymore. Eventually, in 2021, she finally did. And then came the worst night of my life. Halloween 2021. We were still in Florida. I went out trick-or-treating with a younger friend of mine, trying to have a normal night for once. Meanwhile, Jay decided to break into our apartment. He smashed things, tore through the place, and bizarrely took my puppy out for a walk in the middle of committing the crime. To this day, I still don't understand that part. My dog probably had a great time. But in all of this, my mom made a decision that still blows my mind. Instead of calling police and staying safe, she decided that we were going to confront him. Me and her, alone. Now, she brought a knife, in her words, just in case. We got there, and there was another woman with him. That immediately turned everything explosive. There was screaming, chaos, and then a physical fight broke out. I called 911, but before they got there, I beat the ever-loving out of Jay. I was a teenager carrying years of anger, fear, humiliation, and rage, and when it all came out, it came out on his face. But in the midst of this exchange, my mom couldn't clearly see what was happening in the struggle. She thought that Jay was overpowering me, getting the best of me. So she stabbed him. It wasn't fatal, and honestly, from what I remember, he had enough body fat on him that it didn't become some life-threatening wound down the road. Afterwards, he didn't even go to the hospital, but when police arrived, they saw my mom with marks on her neck, learned about the apartment situation, the knife, and they arrested her for assault and somehow breaking and entering. Not him, her. That was the apparent gravity that this man had in our lives. Even when he was the one causing the chaos, somehow we were the ones being dragged down by it. Now, the court process for all of this came and went. My mom eventually avoided the worst of it through a diversion-style program, but she was still branded a felon until she completed everything. We were done. We left Florida and moved back north, eventually settling in New Jersey. For the first time in years, it felt like we could breathe. There was no more tension in the apartment, no walking on eggshells, and Jay, he never showed up. And yeah, I know I was a major reason that she finally left him. I'd pushed hard for years. I begged her to see what he was, and I fought with her about staying. I told her that the entire time she was only choosing misery. So when we left him behind, I felt relief. Then, a month later, I got news that I'll never forget. Jay's sister had contacted us. He had shot himself in the head, shucking on its own, but then she decided to share the suicide note. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I laughed when I heard it at first. It's ugly to admit, but it's the truth. Years of pain turned into one burst of cruel satisfaction. The man who'd terrorized us died alone, by himself, no family around, and no one left to control, just himself and whatever f***ed up shit was in his head. Here's the thing, as I continue to get older, the laughter, that fades. Now I'm left with something that feels much messier. I know I didn't pull the trigger. I know that this adult made his own choices. Every abusive thing that he did, every manipulation, every violent act, and including that final, ultimate decision. But I also know that helping my mom leave him destroyed the version of life that he'd built around controlling us. He lost his relationship, the house. He lost the people that, I'm not going to say that he loved, but he used. And not long after that, he took his own life. So yeah, part of me feels like karma just caught up with him. That's the natural order. Part of me feels like justice happened naturally. But part of me feels guilty that I can trace a line from our escape to his death. Now, maybe that's irrational. I've had some people tell me as much. But I think that that's what trauma can do to you. It can convince you that you're responsible for things that were never yours to carry. I don't really know how to unpack that, but I'm hoping that some therapy helps to sort it all out. And what I do know is this. Jay hurt a lot of people. We finally got free, and he just could not deal with what was left when there was nobody left there to hurt.